Can we see the screen? Awesome, awesome. So I'm not going to keep y'all waiting. We're going to dive in. Um, so I've switched things up this format since from the last series. I realized that we need to do a little bit more like what is this stuff, right? I think building, there are so many tutorials on building. But if I can do my best to make this more practical and concrete and explain the power of this technology and what you need to do to prepare, then I think when I have people come to me and say, oh, I'm ready to build an agent, right? Then we can get right to work with building the agent because we have all the foundational things in place for the agents to thrive, right? And so today we're going to talk about how to prep your business for its first AI team member. Let's rewind. I'm Blessing Richardson, founder of Sela, tech strategist and engineer. And I have spent more than, gosh, how old am I? Okay. So I spent more than 15 years, I think, in tech. Yeah, 15 years working professionally in tech, from self-taught coder to launching a freelance business, doing graphic design, photography, web design, and then graduating, going to college as an engineer, working in cloud, doing software consulting. As you can see, I've been drenched in this thing for a long time. And I've worked with micro businesses, nonprofits, solopreneurs, authors, and corporations, and some of the big Fortune 100 companies in tech. And the through line that I've seen, regardless of people's size, regardless of how sophisticated their team is, regardless of their budgets, is that as tech has gotten better, the through line isn't actually tech and the issues with tech, right? People bring in tools and, oh, it doesn't work. And we take it out and we try this method and it didn't work. And we're going to try something else. We're going to hire this contractor. What I find is that in teams where their data and their information are not organized and clean, they always have problems. They always have problems. And that is like the evidence of the problem, right? We see problems in people wanting to challenge the tech and take it on sometimes, where tech is new and it's big and it's a little confusing if you're not used to it. And so we have those kind of issues. We have issues of not understanding that sometimes actually all the time, your tech solutions that you bring into the business, particularly with IT, are only as good as the data and the information and your business processes. Whatever you build cannot overcome any hurdles that present themselves there. And so now that I'm working with clients on AI, we're going right back to the data. We're going right back to the SOPs. We're going right back to all those things because that's what the AIs need. And so why is this so important? What even is an AI agent, right? And why is this so critical right now? AI agents are a little bit different from chatbots and one-off tools. So most of us are using AI from the perspective of a Claude, a chat GPT, or some other chat-ish interface where we are talking to these agents, right? And it's turn for turn. I give it a message, it responds, and then I give it another message and it responds. We're going turn for turn. Agents are different because they can converse amongst themselves. And so instead of me going in and waiting turn for turn, I can go to a group of agents or a team and say, hey, you're my social media team. So let's say I have my junior social media assistant in the business, right? And its job is to take my long form content and produce short form content by writing the captions and creating the graphics, because we can do that now, right? And so I say, hey, go off and do this. And the little bots that I have now, the one that is my graphic designer bot that knows how to design graphics, the one that is my copywriter bot that understands my copywriting rules, the one that is my brand voice that understands how I actually speak, right? And then another one that understands my podcast. All these bots can now work together without me interjecting to go through and write the content and then create the graphics. So this is where we are. They can take turns themselves and converse and do work now. So I could just, like using ChatGPT, when we first started using it, if we went in and said, hey, go give me a bunch of captions for a social media for this podcast, or go give me a bunch of captions and post, it usually gave us a lot of garbage because that wasn't enough. Right? We'd have to prime the conversation. We have to set it up, give it examples and all this other stuff. Agents are no different. They can be a little bit better, but if we want consistent output of work in our businesses from agents, we actually have to give it some rules and parameters. So now might sound a little nuts if I'm like, oh, the agent can go and like create the graphics and do the things, right? It most certainly can. So in ChatGPT, when we use it and we talk, we're mostly having conversation, right? And if you have Claude in your business, you might be aware that they popularized and helped us coin what we call MCP, which I'm not going to get into the tech definition of that, But all it means is that the robots can use the integrations themselves. So instead of me building a workflow that says this is how you like create the graphic, and this is how you save it to Google Drive, and this is the name of the file, this is the folder you put it in. Instead, I just say, hey, new AI team member, here's access to my Google Drive. You can figure out how to do all the things. That's what MCP does. It adds this nice layer on top of integrations where the AI begins to understand how to use the tools. So if AI is now becoming really, really smart about how to use the tools without my instructions, then what's left is the context. What's left is the what we're doing and the why we're doing it and the who needs it to be done and who's being served. We no longer have to over-index on explaining the how, like we did when we built traditional automations. So the reframe that I like to give you today is when you're hiring a junior staff member that's new to your business, your systems and your expectations, what do they need to thrive? Because we have now moved from prompting to agents. How do we set up team members for success? And what are the shifts we have to make to then set up our AI team members for success? And so this comes back down to data and information, right? If I have an outdated guide on my core business context, so I have a document that says these are my mission and my values, and this is my target audience. But yeah, like we pivoted 3 months ago, right? And so technically everything's in flux. Well, I get that businesses change, right? I've pivoted, I've niched down, right? But it means that there's no up-to-date reference for a new hire in the business to know what's really going on. And whereas people will give us their grace to figure it out and come along with us, right? If we expect to have AI team members where we can delegate things to and begin to reduce our hand holding with those agents, then we need more things figured out for them to do what we need them to do. So we need to set them up for success with up-to-date information. And that's going to look like your mission, your values, your target audience, the services you provide, um, and the way that you think, right? What grounds every decision you make? Because these are things that we kind of instill in the people around us. And these AIs are becoming more aware about how to process that information when we give it to them. And so it might feel like a little out there to start with kind of the brand identity stuff and like, oh, this is like my vision and all this kind of stuff. But that you can take that information and almost imbue it into the agent's personality. So it really does start with a perspective that this is my business. This is, your business. So let's go with Mel. Mel, this agent works in your business. It understands the way you think. It understands what drive you. It understands your customers and what's important to them, right? It has an idea of your ideal client or your customer profile. Therefore, if you were to assign this agent to do social media for you, it now has a perspective that it will work from, right? It now has a perspective to pair with the tactical part of doing the work, and it will inform the decisions that it makes. Brand presence, brand and presence information is really helpful if the agents just know. It's like giving somebody like your address, right? It would be helpful if I'm like, go write something for me, like go write an email for me. And it's like, ah, yes, well, here's a lovely email from fill in the blank. And my signature is fill in the blank. And my, website and contact information is fill in the blank. How much more helpful will it be if I just give you the information up front? So I don't get left with extra work to go fill in blanks when you could just know what needs to be done and what information needs to go where. That's why I find this having this information in one concise place is extremely helpful for AI. And of course, same thing for a human team member, right? If you're going to introduce somebody into your business, they would probably need to know your footprint across the internet. If you have a physical location, yeah, we're going to need to start putting that information down there. Exactly, Abe. That's the stuff that you get. Abe put in the chat, hi, fill in the blank like presenter name. I'm moved to be here, right? That's great, but like if I'm giving that to an agent, fill it in for me, right? And that's what this context helps. Process and SOPs. Real SOPs explain why you do something, not just where you're clicking. This has been a pet peeve of mine when I come in and work with clients over the years, and it's like, oh, we have SOPs, like we've invested, we've built all these SOPs, and I start looking at the SOPs, and you have leaders who think that everything's documented, but then you have contributors who are going, yeah, we don't read those or use those because they're kind of like out of date. They're not really accurate, right? Because SOPs, standard operating procedure documents, right? I believe they are most effective when they explain the why things are getting done, the who is affected by it, the what is happening, not the how. Because now we live in a world that is so digital and digital moves so quickly, that is one of the massive pros of it. The con is that it is hard to memorialize that information and snapshot it, right? How the Google interface looks today will change. And so if I spend so much time trying to train somebody on when you go into my inbox and you see this email, and then you're going to click this label and you're going to label it and you click this button and this is it. And that's SOP for managing my inbox. What that person has not understood is the decision-making criteria I'm using to determine what label has to be added, right? Regardless of where the button moves on the page, if I bring somebody into my business to manage my inbox, the expectation is, you find the emails that look like receipts and invoices and you label them for bookkeeping. How you go about labeling them for bookkeeping might change, right? Tomorrow, Google might add folders to to Gmail, and so maybe we switch the method or how we do it from labels to folders. But if I'm giving a strategic hire in my business a task, I assume that you will understand my desired outcome, which is to have my bookkeeping related emails indexed correctly and particularly pull out the ones that are related to invoices and receipts. The method might shift and change, but the process is effectively the same. And when you have better SOPs in the business, again, remember, AIs now are, because of MCP, AIs can figure out what tools to use. It's like the equivalent of saying, hey, my inbox agent, I'm giving you my logins to my Google Drive. I'm giving you my logins to my Gmail. So you have all the tools you need. Here's the criteria on how I look at my emails and determine what is a good bookkeeping email, right? You know how to label it. Great. You know how to save things to Google Drive. Awesome. I'm just going to tell you how I look at my inbox, and you can figure out how to use the tools to get it done. And so that's why those are so important now. So if you've been writing SOPs and you're like, oh my gosh, we say we need them. I mean, it's helpful and it doesn't really work and hold and like, we feel like we're wasting time, money, and energy maintaining SOPs. I would advise that we start switching from the how to more so of the whys. There are many tools that can automate documenting the how, but you have to own describing the why and what and the who around your processes, okay? And then it makes your AI team members adaptive because now, again, they actually have programmatic access to these tools. They're not going into the interfaces and clicking buttons a lot of the times. And you can with some of them, which is really cool. You can hook them up and they spin up a little computer and they go use a computer like a human. And there's benefits to that method. But for the most part, for most of these big tools that we use, they have integration access. And so they're not going through interfaces. They're just directly talking to Gmail, directly talking to Google Drive, directly talking to Notion. And so we don't want to get in the weeds of how they get stuff done, but we want to make sure we're clear so they can adapt to those changes over time. Published content. I have to call this one out because so much of our thought leadership, if you produce content of any type, whether it's public, private, a podcast, it's website material, it is blog material, it's just monologues that you keep private, right? So much of our natural thought leadership is actually polished and published if we're producing these assets in our business. And so when I started working on content, I thought I needed this massive library of my ideas. And I had like a whole content tracker. I was like in it and then I never used it, but that's a different situation. I had this whole table in Notion with all my ideas and I was pinning them and, all this other stuff. But then I realized I was bookmarking other people's ideas. And what I had was a collection of inspiration, honestly. What I was low on was my production of things that were my curated thoughts, right? And so I realized, I think it's far better to actually keep a library of things that I have published, the things that have gone through editing and review, the things that have my stamp of approval to say this represents how I think and feel about a certain thing in this moment in time. I'm going to snapshot that and put that in one place in my business, right? And so having that published content is really a shortcut into having a library of thought leadership curated. And when you have that, then your AI team members can begin to refer to it, right? Yes, I can go and pin a number of documentation out there. I can go pin a number of things and snapshot on the right ways to manage inboxes. First of all, I'm not really an inbox manager. I've never done VA work. I would have to go and do the search because my inbox is a nightmare generally. So I would personally have to go and do the search, right? But what would be better for my business, possibly, is that if I even had just a rambling monologue about what annoys me about my current inbox and why it's frustrating for me, if I had that, if I just had it anywhere, That's just an internal thought, right? Not even an external one that's public, just an internal one. That could be in my little Rolodex of monologues. And then when I go to ChatGPT, I can say, hey, can you go find that bit where I ranted about my inbox stuff? Let's work through a solution. Help me design an agent that can fix these problems in my inbox. Just the fact that it exists, right? Just the fact that it exists, that's just helping me in my business, let alone me taking a polished piece of content, which I'm going to show you soon, and see how that gets transformed into something that we can use in the business as well by using agents to help us do that. So we're about to go into a thought exercise, but before I do, I want to know questions. I'm looking away because I'm trying to make sure my phone does not go off. I'm seeing it light up, and I'm like, the last thing I need to do is ring out loud. So let's put this in silent mode, like I should have done before. Do not disturb. Thank you very much. All right. So before we move on to the thought exercise, questions. Do we have any questions so far? All right, y'all. We're moving. So, where could AI help first? Where could AI help first? I normally walk through a bit of this, this is a minified version of this when I'm working with clients to figure out what we're going to build and how we're going to build it. But let's talk it through. So I look at this from at least 4 places. What is high frequency? What happens a lot? What do you do often? Does it drive revenue? Does it reduce major pain, right? Because these are going to be great candidates for AI and automation. So what are the things we do very often that have high impact? I think most of us are aware of those things, right? What are the things that are routine but low impact, right? These are not really value drivers of the business. They're not revenue drivers. And they produce really low ROI, honestly, in and of themselves. They might contribute to something else that's larger, but in and of themselves, they happen a lot and they're not the best use of our time, but they need to happen. So high frequency, low impact. Low frequency, high impact. This is infrequent, but if we do it poorly, it causes some major issues. And so we want to automate, not simply to make it more efficient, but we want to automate to make it more consistent, right? I often look at those as high risk, high value type of things. And then low impact, low priority. It's rarely done, automate only if you have the time to do so, right? And this could be the little things that make us happy. Like for instance, when I set up and we're going to talk more about a little bit of my podcast workflow, but I set up an automation that will change the color of the Google Drive folder based off of what stage of editing the podcast episode is in for my benefit. No one else's. Like literally no one else's but mine. So that way when I look in Google Drive, it matches what I see in Notion and I'm happy, right? It was really quick, low priority, low impact. But it made me happy to do it. Did I maybe need to spend the extra hour to do it? Maybe not. But it was a late evening. It was a Friday night, and I like to challenge myself with hackathons. So there we go. And so right now, what I want you to think about are those 4 things: high frequency, low frequency, high impact, low impact. If anybody wants to share those things in the chat, what I love to do is actually begin to talk through what are some bits of information that you might need to prep your team for an AI agent that might take that on. So we're going to do a little bit of a live tech strategy if anybody wants to step up. Also, I think you should have a button if you just want to join the call and ask. You can do that too. But I'm looking in the chat. Is there anything that you think falls into any of these categories? You're like, I would love to see that delegated. And maybe I need to think about how we get the data to make that work. Anna said creating a proposal for a client. And then I'm going to have Anoma join the call soon. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and hit yes. Create a proposal for a client. That is for sure. Oh my goodness. The ways I have dreamt about creating a full proposal generation pipeline, y'all. Yes. So let's talk it through. If we were going to create a proposal for a client, I can think of a few things that need to exist. Information on the offer for the business, right? because there's certain clauses that change in a proposal. The service delivery, or what you're promising. What are you actually delivering on? And what is the work product? The work product might not even change, the deliverables, right? But how you're doing it and how you're customizing it for the client, that might be something that you need. So information on the specific client, the general information on the product or service itself that you're providing, and then probably a template. And if we could put those three things together and some examples, we probably can get an AI to produce really, really good clauses to go back and put inside the template for you. And Noma, thanks for joining. Can you unmute?
When you asked us for examples, I took a look at your matrix, and I really like it because it helped me to realize that the pain point that I keep dropping the ball on right now is something that is low frequency, but actually high risk. And so I had misprioritized it. For my own business, this has been invoicing. The fact that some of my deals that I close have a unique invoicing situation. And right now, a human being is the bottleneck in making sure that the actual invoices we program in our invoicing system matches what we said inside of our proposal. So that's an area where it's like, oh, I see this now as being high impact, but low frequency. Whereas before it was like, it happens so infrequently, I'll get around to it.
Yeah. Yep. I say that because we talked about that before, and I'm like, guilty as well. It's like having the time to do it, but also realizing, yes, that little thing that happened that you just didn't realize. If this
Yeah,
is done poorly, the ripple effect is significant.
it's awful.
Horrendous. Um, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. We have a few more questions in the chat, and I'm going to get to that before we move on. How do you think about Abe asked, how do you think about stuff that definitely could and should be delegated but isn't in a structured data format at all, and would take a lot of extra work to clean up info first to get it into a data format that AI could use? I'll have a bit of today's example isn't as messy, but what I've done is that I do have an automation in my business where I prefer to process all of my meeting transcripts myself. I love the AI tools, they're helpful, but they don't have enough control to really break down my meeting notes the way I want. And I have different types of meetings. I'm sure many of us, we have connection calls, we have sales calls, we have service delivery calls where we're following up on stuff. We have we don't know what this really is call, right? Um, and so what I find is that it's far better for me to do my own automation and processing of all my transcripts, which I do. And so I have my meeting app send everything, including the transcript and its action items, into an automation that I have. And in that automation, I actually have an AI step that will look at the transcript and try and decide what type of meeting it is, if that makes sense. And so for things that are not structured, we want to try and what we call classification, right? We want to try and classify it. If I can't tell what it is and it's not clean, can I at least begin to make some decisions? And again, that decision tree of saying, this looks like this kind of meeting. And so because this looks like a general connection call meeting, now I'm going to move to another step where I'm going to process this again with AI, but I'm going to look for different insights from it than it being a sales call. For a sales call, I might look for things like what's their pain point? What, product or service did I pitch on the call to make sure I follow up with the right email, right? For a connection call or like a collaboration call, I have different questions. What did this person say that they do well? What did they say that need? What did I promise? What did I promise to do, to and reciprocally, or what did I share with them? Did they give me any information on any thing that I can help promote for them? Right? I have different questions, and so because the general format is a file of a bunch of words, that makes it really easy to pull that information right out of my note taker. But the way I analyze it is different. And so we just add those steps to the process to begin to kind of build the shape of the data as we go. And once we pull it out, we can reconstruct it into a clean format. Haley said, I'm coming from a recruiting lens and research is so time consuming. Would love an AI automation that helps with research and comms. Come on, girl, because people have been working overtime with this, okay? When we do research as a whole in any step, and I see a lot in sales, AI is going to be great at this because, again, we now have agents that are smart with tools. We can go into a number of automation tools. Relay app, I love. You can do it there. I do it with NAN. You could do it with Zapier right now where you can build these workflows that have AI steps in them, where you take a step and it's an AI step that says, oh, you told me that you met with so and so, and you can give it like your calendar event, which is what I like to do. I like to take my calendar event and say, hey, this is a link to the calendar event on my calendar. Go pull it. And we'll get the details and see the people on the call. And it can look at their email addresses to figure out what website that person has, and even go and search LinkedIn. And so without me telling it how to search LinkedIn, I can just say, this is the details for the meeting that I have that's upcoming. I need you to go and search and get some background information on this person. Search LinkedIn, search Google, right? And go to their website and get as much information as you can that tells me who this person is. Again, just by using my words and saying, go do the search. Some of these models will go and just do the search for you, right? Um, Deep research in ChatGPT and some of these AI tools, they literally just have it built into the app where I can give it the information, say, this is the project I have, this is the information I need, go look for it. Recently, this was much more technical. I had to do research on MySQL. It's a database language or database program. And I said, you know what? I need to go look at this in a way I've never looked at it before. Here's the problem. Here's the situation. Here are some links on the internet, but go do your thing. And literally it took like, what is it, 15 minutes, 13 minutes to go scour the internet and different things to come back and do all that deep research for me. And then I told it to reformat its response to help me parse through it better. And so we already really have the tools, Haley, to start doing that research. And my advice is just roll up our sleeves, start using it. And once you start getting the feedback you want from those tools, just turn that into reusable prompt or automation. I'm going to keep, uh, we have one more note here from Abe. Let me see if that's a question or a comment. Yes, Abe said invoicing is such an impactful area. For sure. For sure. Um, I do have a similar process of this for my invoices as well. I will throw it literally my emails, my documents, my attachments, and then I'll tell it again, I'll classify it and say, is this a receipt? Is this an invoice? Is this a transaction? Is this like a subscription change, right? Classify it. And after that, we go, okay, based off of what it is, I need to pull information, the transaction ID, the description of the items on it, the vendor name, the date that it was sent or received. Pull all that data out. Great. Now I want you to name my file in Google Drive in a very specific order. The date of the transaction, the vendor name that's associated with it, and if so, the dollar amount in the title, if I even want it, so that way I can just search Google Drive to find the files. So again, by going through that pattern, you're able to really get structured information out of unstructured data. So hopefully this little thought exercise gave you some ideas on how you can begin to restructure your information to make it easier for AI to find and understand. But we're going to get really practical here. And before we move on, I want to mention this. When I do this exercise with people, we go a bit deeper beyond the 4 parts of this matrix. And we look at internal and external. Is this something that is going to help with operations, reporting, admin stuff? Is this going to be externally facing with client outreach, customer support, sales, and follow up? It's also where I like to give people the tidbit here, and I'll give it to you, is that you have to know what things in your business are good for automation and are good for AI, right? I think most anything can be automated. Call me a little bit biased. I think a lot of things can be good for AI. But I think also a lot of things are not good for AI, like for AI to review and approve on its own, right? And so one, be judicious about where you're inviting AI into the business. 1, 2, my general rule of thumb is if it is external, make it internal first. Make it an internal process first so you can test and improve the output of the AI and essentially build trust with this AI teammate before you allow it to do anything directly, right? Iterate and improve. If it is internal, you have much more room to experiment and figure out what works. But there's also an association that, well, if it's not external or I can't productize it in a way, will it add as much value? And it's really hard to measure for teams because most of the time we're not granular about measuring how we do what we do, right? We're usually good at measuring the outcome. So I spent, 15 hours on a report. Well, I said it's really like 4 hours, but I didn't include all the time that's been agonizing over it for a week. And then, all the time that's spent thinking about it. And then all the different people I might have asked in my social circle, formally or informally, to help me on this report, right? The time that I spent to sit down and really do it for the client. Yeah, I think between starting and stopping, it really was actually 15 hours. but I put down on paper it's a 7-hour activity and I bill this much for it. So we're sometimes not great at counting the cost of what it takes to do internal things, right? Which then throws off, I think, the value analysis or the cost analysis when we say, how much does it cost to get a thing done, really, right? And what should I be optimizing? Which is why I always say, start internal. If it doesn't seem sexy or exciting, I get it, but we're often time blind and resource blind to the things that we're doing anyways, and all the micro steps that we take. And so you'll find that once you build solutions to pull yourself out of the weeds of one small thing, another small thing, all your solutions become Legos themselves. And all of a sudden you're looking back over like, a quarter, 2, 3, 4 quarters and going, we've automated ourselves out of so much stuff. We have time to do what matters, right? And so don't dismiss the internal stuff because that's where you're going to get some gains. So now we're going to do a little bit of a demo, okay? Well, more of a talk through, honestly. We're not going to build anything today. But I have my podcast process here. And what I do to capture my podcast after they've been published is that I have an automation in my business that watches my RSS feed. And we're going to look at this a little closer. And I can actually trigger it in 3 ways, right? I'm building my automations in N8N. And I can build my automations, this particular automation is triggered in 3 ways. One, every time I have a new episode, I pull the data out of it. Every time on a timer here, I go back and I look at older episodes. I don't think for more than like maybe 90 or 45 days, something like that. Because sometimes you have to change a description, you have to edit something, right? And so if I make any changes to something, I want to make sure it's captured and it gets logged away in Google Drive as well. And then I have a manual button here because sometimes I just want to run it when I want to run it. So I have 3 different ways to trigger this automation in my business. And ultimately, we're reading from my blog, my podcast RSS feed, which whenever you subscribe to a podcast, it has a feed that you add to Spotify, Apple Podcast, or anything like that. It's a public URL that you make available. And I'm going to pull it down and I'm going to pull all the episodes I care about. That's the first part of it. The second part is that I'm going to go and convert that. All this says is I'm going to convert it into a nice, pretty format. I'm going to save the information about that episode to Google Drive as a document, and I'm going to then log it in a Google Sheet. So 2 things. I am taking the information about the episode in full that's in the RSS feed and saving it to an individual file. I am then logging it into a Google Sheet that has all of my episodes. I want to show you what that looks like in the Google Sheet. Okay, so this is going to take me to, I believe I want to open up this one, the spreadsheet. And we're going to share a different screen here. As I'm pulling this up, I'm curious if that process in and of itself seems a little new or it's something that you're doing in the business, in your own business, to begin to grab your own content. Because again, all that pre-planning prep stuff, I use the pre-prep work that I do, but I found that it's the published content that I really want to stay in the brain because, it's polished. It's my authoritative take on that idea that I had. Abe asked, is this N8N? It most certainly is. That is the product I'm using. I'm actually hosting it on my own installation, so I don't have to pay for credits. It's nice. I have lots of fun things in there. Okay, so this is what my spreadsheet, my podcast spreadsheet looks like. Now, it's not the prettiest thing, so let's see if I can fix the word wrap here. Please do not merge. How do I get this to work? No. There we go. Okay, so we have the ID of the podcast episode. We have the title itself. We have the link to it. So if you click on this, you can get to the episode, right? We have all the information that's really in the RSS feed, the information I care about at least. But then, remember I mentioned that Google Drive file that I'm creating? I have a link to that Google Drive file. And this is another text version that has all the information. So the spreadsheet is kind of like an index. It's a lookup. It is the one spreadsheet that I know an AI can look at, or a human, to say, where are all the podcasts, right? I don't have to go searching through Google Drive. I have an index of it. And then when you go into the episode itself and the Google Drive file, you're going to get all the rich information on the show notes and everything else inside of it. Now I'm known to be a stickler about how I name my files for this reason. Okay. And so not only does my Google Drive have this file, it also has my transcripts as well. What this means is when I go in to ChatGPT, because everything has been kind of logged together with consistent naming, there's an index for it. I'm going to copy this link. When I go into ChatGPT here, I can ask it, what do you know about? There we go. See how now it's reading documents? I probably should have prompted it directly to go and search. Um, but here we are. Okay, so it found information. And as it's writing that up, if I look at sources, it's going to show you all the things it searched, but that spreadsheet most definitely came up now. So it is right there on the side, that Google spreadsheet. And so I know that I went in there to look for it. And the reason why the spreadsheet is really helpful, but having those links to the other files, is that if for some reason it looks um, in the wrong place, right? Then it will always have this index to point it back to the relevant files. And so these are the two things that I found that makes AI far more accurate. And then here you see, okay, now it's like, this is what it chose to cite from. So it's citing from the right things. It looked everywhere, but it's citing from some of the most relevant stuff. And I do have a version of my podcast stuff in Notion, and I export stuff from Notion. So this is what that is. NTN, that's Notion for me. So it's pulling all these things out of Drive, and I found everything that's relevant. But at first, had to search, and I knew it was going to hit that Google Sheet to find information. Okay. And so this is the two-pronged approach I have for really curating experiences with AI, where the brain, this is what I like to call my brain, being Google Drive, it has the information organized in a way that I know when I search for things, it will stumble across the right context and it will pull out what it needs for me to keep going and do the work that I want to do. Right? So let's go back to the other screen. Has anyone else noticed ChatGPT acting different since they rolled out memory? Part of me is like, these are cool upgrades, and other parts is you're changing the behavior I'm building on and I'm counting on. You always got it is infuriating. Abe said it's infuriating. It is. I have a question here. Abe said, do you prefer ChatGPT over Gemini for this native to Drive? Do I prefer ChatGPT over Gemini? So here's my thing. Every experience I've had with Gemini and like the browser has been unfortunately just garbage. I don't understand why Gemini can't understand the context of a simple email. I don't know why. That is really, really hard. What I have when I've used Gemini to build technology on the back end, it is extremely effective. Um, Mel said, yes, I got used to chatting with it, quote, dumb. I don't know. I don't know how to do that part probably really well. So that's not going to happen easily for me. To try and have a dumb conversation with AI, I feel like it is inherent to the point. I don't know. But um, when I build custom things on it, it's amazing. I've used some of their models to actually help me with doing a lot of content or analysis and review. And Gemini is freaking fantastic, honestly, their models. So I don't know what's going on with the browser and the app experience. Really glad though if they update that and they improve it. Um, yeah, the chat is really funny right now. Um, and so that's the other benefit though. When you start building your automations, and you mix them in with AI, one, it gives you back control. So the way that ChatGPT just kind of fumbled, it wasn't consistent every time. This is the first time I've actually looked for a podcast episode and didn't come up with the right one. Of course, that would happen during a webinar. But if I build a workflow and I attach the workflow to an agent and I tell the agent, go find a podcast episode, it will then say, oh, I have a workflow. I have a tool that's a workflow for that. So that way it will look up the podcast episodes the right way every single time and tell me what I believe it should. Right. And so these automation tools are really, really powerful because you can mix the AI's ability to make a decision with telling it how to do things the right way. And it gives you full control. Why does this work? Ultimately, it's data hygiene. That's what I like to call it. Having your data all together, your files labeled, having cleaner documents, better naming structure, all that stuff, because AI is actually understanding the naming of your files even, what you're putting in them, what you're naming them, the folders that they're in, all that is now informative information. And so by having your clean spreadsheets, yes, that will create bias for the AI, and it will go, oh, yeah, yeah, I get that. Or it will go, I don't know what that means if our naming conventions aren't accurate. Um, we really want to leverage that bit. That alone can just improve so much of your experience by naming things the right way and organizing them logically and consistently. So data hygiene will make that work for you. And after I made the documents again, all I had to do was plug it up to ChatGPT, and now, ChatGPT understands me. So what's next? Next week, we're going to talk about how to onboard your first AI team member. Today was mostly the fact that we got to get our data house in order, right? We need to start thinking about what information do we need to start pulling from the work that we do, whether it's the work that we do behind the scenes or the things that we publish, right? Pulling that back in to our brain or our storage solutions that we use in the business that we know that can connect to AI. Whatever that is, you want to start bringing that together. Have your brand information. I have that as well. Now that we have AIs that are really good at graphic design, I prepared for that. So what that means is I have a document with my brand guidelines, access to the fonts I use, the name of the fonts I prefer to use, and my hex codes and colors and what they are and the purpose of each color in general designs, right? Um, that there's a document for that. So that way, when I have my graphic designer agent show up in the business, it can be effective. Um, And so that's what we're going to talk about next, how to onboard your first AI team member. And what does it mean if we start to go from, oh, we have all this information, but let's narrow in on what one team member can do, right? And then, now my plan is not to just give you all the things and leave you hanging. In July, I plan to do a workshop. We're going to do one. It's 3 days, 2 agents, 1 brain. What do you have to do to start to build this AI brain to run your business on? And have your agents actually be informed and knowledgeable. And we're going to build 2 agents out of that brain in 3 days. This is going to be a bit of a different workshop because I think a lot of times when you attend a workshop, you pay for one seat. Um, but I realize that for our businesses, particularly, actually, it doesn't even matter if you're a micro business or solopreneur, you might end up outsourcing the build of some of these systems, anyways. And I realized it could be helpful to have the strategist or the person who knows the business and what needs to get done and how it needs to get done, and the builder present, right? Particularly for that first day, to figure out how do we begin to talk about things so someone understands what needs to be built, and how it needs to be built. And it can be more of a collaborative process versus saying, hey, this is what I need, go figure it out, right? And how do we have that conversation so it's constructive? And so this will be a little bit different in that I invite people to bring a +1 to this. It's not open, it's not even pre-sale. This is the first time it's actually been announced. And so if you scan this QR code and fill out that form, you can check off that you're interested, and I'll add you to that wait list for July, because that's going to be really, really fun. I want us to be able to move forward and start building these kinds of things in our businesses. So that way, once we get done with the no code and the low code, right, we're going to get those high value agents in the business that are a bit more complex and a lot smarter. And they're going to start to move things like client delivery off your plate. They're going to handle whole SOPs and business processes for you, and possibly be able to be turned into products. But we got to start with the brain, right? And then now we're going to open it back up for a Q&A. I'm reading the chat right now. Yes, the Gemini chat browser version does kind of suck. So apparently, Gemini and Workspace is pretty cool. Amara, we're gonna have a one-on-one because you've been consistent about this, and I don't see what you see. So you're just gonna. I need the training. I need to see how you use it to be convinced, because I'm not mad about killing a subscription in my life. Like, won't hurt me at all. But I will need the training. I will need a one-on-one with Amara to make that work. Do we have any more questions? Yeah, I know. Google made a series of AI announcements yesterday that are, quote, changing the game. Yeah, it's surprising that it took them this long to pull ahead, but then not in a way. Um, and I think Google is showing up the way most of us thought they should, for AI, which is extremely, extremely exciting. Um, and again, I might have mentioned it earlier, but I am using some of the Gemini models in the work that I'm doing, and I mean, dang, it is amazing. So I'm excited for more and more things coming out of Google right now. Abe said, "Disruptor be disrupted." I think the others are nipping at their heels, and they kind of got their stuff together. We'll see. Because here's the thing: AI is actually a very expensive investment, to be a builder of AI and producer, and it was just one of those things where I said, ultimately, the big guys will figure it out because it requires a lot of capital investment. Um, but watching how the different models have their competencies has been fun too, because again, at least from my perspective as a consumer and a business user of I get the best of all the worlds because I can have different team members with different models to create, or different bots with different models to create an amazing AI team member, right? And so I like the AI race. I feel like right now it is we at the other end of it tend to come out on top, so long as the costs don't multiply on our end. Because right now I'm paying fractions of pennies a day to run most of my AI stuff myself, honestly, and it's pretty cool. Yes, yeah, yeah. Amara said she was betting on Google. Yeah, it's hard to bet against Google, but they look like they wanted us to for a while. It was scary there. It was scary there. So, this is it, y'all. I think we're the first time. Are we rounding up early? Are we? I wanted to make sure I moved through this so we had enough time for questions and comments and feedback, and that I can address any questions that you have about getting your data in order. Because now we're going to start, we started really big and we're going to bring it back in to really start to shape up what an AI team member looks like. But you got to get your AI onboarding. That's what it is. All right, y'all. I'm excited. I will look forward to seeing everybody again next week. And get ready for it, y'all. We're gonna dive deep.